All right. So I think we've got a good group here to go ahead and get started this morning. So before we even get into the welcome or any of the logistics, I just want to make sure that we take care of anyone who needs Spanish interpretation services. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our interpretation team, Tanya and Diana, to give the introduction on how folks can take advantage of those services during our event today.
Thank you. Buenos días. El día de hoy tenemos el servicio de interpretación disponible para aquellas personas que lo requieran. Ya está activada la función, así que los que están conectados desde una computadora, en la parte de abajo del menú de Zoom hay un icono que parece un mundo. Pueden seleccionar ese icono que dice interpretación y luego seleccionan el idioma español y silenciar el audio original para que puedan escuchar una sola voz, la interpretación del inglés al español. Y si se están conectando desde una tableta o desde un dispositivo móvil, pueden tocar su pantalla, seleccionar los 3 puntos, interpretación de idiomas o language interpretation. Seleccionamos nuevamente español, silenciar el audio original y al finalizar hay una opción que dice finalizado, terminado o listo. Ahora voy a dar las mismas indicaciones, pero en inglés. Gracias. Hello, everyone. Today we'll have interpretation available for those who need it. The function is already been activated, so if you're joining from a computer, at the bottom of the Zoom menu, you will see a word-like icon that says interpretation. You can select it and then select English. And if you're joining from a tablet or your phone, you can tap your screen, select the 3 dots, language interpretation, select English, and at the end, you can do done or finished. So you can listen to the interpretation from Spanish into English. Thank you. Gracias.
Great, thank you. So I'll go ahead and start those services now. Make sure we're good. All right, looks like we're all set on that front. Thank you so much. Before we get into the content, I'm going to go over some Zoom housekeeping items. So you'll notice in your menu for the attendees that you have some different options for participation in the event today. You've got your chat box, the Q&A. So for any technical issues that you're having with Zoom, we ask that you would use the chat feature for that. And we have folks who are here and monitoring that chat ready to respond and help you out. And then for any questions that you have about the contents of today's presentation, we ask that you would submit those using the Q&A feature. So those are the 2 different distinctions between those options. We'll be monitoring both, and then we'll handle those questions towards the end of the event today. And then I did want to let everybody know that today's event is being recorded. So we'll make that recording available after the event in both languages, in English and in Spanish. And then to mute and unmute, you can raise your hand if you'd like to ask your question verbally, and then we'll allow you to unmute your microphone and you can ask that way. So if you prefer to engage by unmuting rather than using the Q&A, that is an option. And then the thing about using the Zoom webinar versus the Zoom meeting is that you can see us, but we cannot see you. So just so you know, if you're participating today, there's no camera option. And then we did hold, this same event yesterday in person in Tulare. And so for the in-person crowd, they were given some educational handouts and materials. And we wanted to make sure that you all had access to those as well. So if you'd like to find those handouts and materials, you can go to the same place that you found the event details and did your RSVP for today at ekgsa.org/RSVP. You can go to that link, scroll a little bit down towards where the webinar event details are, and you can download the PDFs there. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark, General Manager of Greater Kaweah GSA, to get us started.
Good morning. Becca, did you want to do that poll, or when were you thinking of doing that?
Oh, good point. Let's do the poll now. Okay, so we're going to make sure everybody who's online, no multitasking, time to grab your attention. We want to go ahead and hear from you all first before we get started. So I'm going to launch a poll. It should show up on your screen. We've got two different questions. The first question is, what GSA are you in? You can select multiple options there. So if you're in multiple GSAs, select those. And then the second question is, how many SGMA meetings have you been to? Maybe this is your first, you've been to at least one. Maybe you're a SGMA Pro, you go to these meetings all the time. We just kind of want to know where everybody's at who's joining us today. This is great. We're getting a lot of responses already, and I'll go ahead and share those once I see things slow down. So we'll give folks maybe another 15 seconds or so. So if you haven't answered, go take care of that now. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll, share the results. So looks like, all right, quite a few East Kaweah, Greater Kaweah, still have a good amount of Mid Kaweah folks here. Awesome. For some folks, this is their first SGMA meeting. Welcome. Great to have you engaged. That's awesome. And then we've got some folks been to at least one. Pretty good amount have been to 10 or more. So there are some SGMA pros in the room, the webinar room today. So that's great. Thanks for participating. And thank you, Mark, for reminding us about the poll. I'll hand it back to you. We can get started.
Of course, yeah. It's great to have you all attend. We had about 165-ish or so yesterday. Good attendance over at the World Ag Expo building. So that was a nice session. We have a repeat of that here online. So what we're talking about today will be the same things that happened yesterday. Looks like we've got over 60 people attending online, and that's super. So welcome. This is for you. It's our opportunity to update you on some of the positive things going on here in the subbasin, the Kaweah Subbasin. I know you hear about a lot of things happening in groundwater, a lot of things happening related to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And this is our opportunity to update you and also give you some of the positive direction that we're going and some of the challenges that we're dealing with. And also how you can be a part of this and keep up to speed with where things are going and help in the process. So this is a great opportunity. Next slide. So we're gonna have our welcomes, which we've pretty much done. We'll talk about the state of the subbasin. The three of us will do a presentation on where things are and get you up to speed with that. Then we have a moderated panel, which the three of us will answer a lot of the questions that we receive on a regular basis. They're really good questions on how things are being managed, where we are with the state board, and issues of the subbasin. So looking forward to that. And then we'll have an opportunity for your questions and such later at the very end of this. So you will have a chance to weigh in. Next slide. So I am Mark Larson. I'm the general manager for the Greater Kaweah GSA. I'm also worked for Kaweah Delta Water Conservation District for about 20 years, and recently, about a little over a year ago, started working for the Greater Kaweah GSA. We have with us also today Aaron Fukuda. He's the interim general manager for the Mid Kaweah GSA. He's also the general manager for Tulare Irrigation District. Aaron's very innovative, has a lot of energy and ideas, and has helped a lot in the formation of the GSAs in the subbasin, and works very integrally with the city of Visalia and city of Tulare. We also have with us Michael Hagman. He's the executive director of the East Kaweah GSA and general manager for Linmore Irrigation District. Michael comes to us with a lot of knowledge and expertise in CVP contractors. He has a lot in the east side, and a good understanding of the geology, of the unique geology of the eastern side of the basin, and some of the challenges that we have there. He's developed a really strong team in the East Kaweah to support the activities of the GSA, and so we'll be giving this presentation. Next slide. So about the Kaweah Subbasin, as we've discussed, there are 3 GSAs that make up the entire Kaweah Subbasin: the Greater Kaweah, the East Kaweah, and the Mid Kaweah. We formed these agencies based on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that was implemented in 2014, which mandates that we work towards groundwater sustainability by 2040. And the good part about the legislation that was really, I think, important was they allowed for local control, local agencies to form to take on this responsibility instead of the state of California running the program. So each GSA is required to develop a plan, what they call a groundwater sustainability plan, that defines how we're going to get to groundwater sustainability by 2040. Our relationship in developing that plan and submitting that plan was with Department of Water Resources. And we submitted those plans in 2020 and another submission in 2022, both of which did not meet the needs of DWR. And so we are now working with the State Water Resources Control Board with the threat of probation if we don't get our plans developed properly in time. So so far we are what they call inadequate status, and we have now turned in a new plan, a draft plan that we submitted last week. And so we're excited about that update. This one addresses all the issues that Department of Water Resources had with our plan. And we're working on the State Water Resources Control Board comments till later. But Aaron's going to describe that in detail in this next section. Wanted to note something of significance that happened yesterday. We were informed by the State Water Resources Control Board staff that our probationary hearing that is set for November 5th has now been moved back to January 7th of 2025. So we have 2 more months to before that probationary hearing takes place. So we're excited about that. I'm going to pass it on to Aaron Fukuda to talk about a little more detail on the plan timing. Aaron?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. You know, we want to make sure it's important everybody understands kind of the timeline and the activities that have taken place and are going to take place. So it's important to note, and Mark kind of alluded to the fact that you know, our original process started with the Department of Water Resources and has transitioned over to the State Water Resources Control Board. So again in 2020, when we submitted our plan, Department of Water Resources was given 2 years to review that plan to see if it conformed with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. In 2022, they indicated to us that there were some items that needed to be fixed. Those were significant items, and they only gave us 6 months to fix those. So we did our best to get the GSPs revised in 2022. And fortunately, in March of 2023, they advised us that the revisions were not good enough. And so at that point, we were deemed inadequate and were passed over to the State Water Resources Control Board. It's important to note, excuse me, we are not in probation right now. We are headed towards a hearing, which they will make that determination. And we're using this time between now and that hearing to try and comply with the deficiencies that we need to fix and to avoid that probation process. And we'll go over that here in a little bit. So again, in March of 2023, we moved over to the State Water Resources Control Board. And my next slide is going to break that process down So you can see how we're moving through that. So again, 2023, we received notice from DWR and moved over to the State Water Resources Control Board. And when we began to meet with them, their recommendation to us was begin working on the items that Department of Water Resources has identified as deficiencies in your GSP. And so at that same time, we spooled up technical teams and resources here in the Kaweah Subbasin and worked collaboratively to start working on those items. So we've been working on those for approximately 13 to 14 months. And again, Mark reported, we finished our revisions based on Department of Water Resources deficiencies and have submitted a draft GSP to the State Water Resource Control Board. During the time period, and they were also, the state board staff was working on an analysis of our GSPs and our approach to sustainability, and they are reflecting their analysis in a draft staff report, which was noticed in May of 2024. I think all landowners in the Kaweah Subbasin received a notice and access to that draft staff report. That draft staff report largely leans on the Department of Water Resources deficiencies that were identified in March of 2023. But it also added a few other items that they found that we needed to work on. Specifically, there's 2 items, water quality issues and interconnected surface water, which my counterpart, Mike Hagman, will talk about in a little bit. So again, after that May time period, when we received that draft staff report, the Kaweah Subbasin had already worked diligently on the Department of Water Resources deficiencies. And so we've already submitted that draft staff report to the State Water Resource Control Board for their review. We are working on a conjoined response to the draft staff report. We're reviewing it right now, working on a response. We'll be providing that to the State Water Resource Control Board. And in the meantime, the State Water Board will be holding some local workshops here in the Visalia area and online next week. And I really encourage landowners to attend these workshops and really share with the State Board the immense amount of momentum and work that we've done here in the Kaweah Subbasin. Because our goal is to avoid the probationary status when they'll have that hearing out in January. And if they hear from the growers that we're doing the hard work on the ground, again, we're going to cover items like our growers are under an allocation. We've implemented a mitigation program. We're installing and constructing recharge basins all the way from the irrigation district level down to the landowner level. I think the state board would have to recognize that the Kaweah Subbasin has put a large amount of effort into sustainability along the path that they're working on their GSP, so it's important. So again, Mark noted that date on that bottom corner there is already out of date. It's no longer November 2024, but January 7th, 2025. Next slide. So it's important to note, though, what happens if we get to January 7th, 2025, and the State Water Resource Control Board holds a hearing, and they determine that we do need to move into a probationary status. And again, I want to impart to everybody, currently we are not in probation. We are working collaboratively with the State Water Resource Control Board to avoid probation. So if they do determine that we need to go into probation, immediately the state will require landowners to register their wells and begin reporting groundwater pumping. We are currently talking to them about alternatives to meters. However, right now in the draft staff report, they are recommending that any pumping greater than 200 acre-feet through a well should have a meter on it. And so you'll have to pay fees. Those fees include $300 per well for registration, and then a volumetric rate of $20 per acre foot for groundwater that's pumped, and then a 25% late fee if you don't, per month, if you don't pay the fees. You have to report all of your pumping extractions to the State Water Resources Control Board. And so the other part is these fees are not going to be used for projects or other items, the money goes to fund the State Water Resources Control Board to oversee this probationary process. So once that money is paid, it no longer comes back to our subbasin. There's a note there. These are fees that we are seeing in the Tulare Lake subbasin, which is currently under probation. So we're not sure if those fees will stay the same for our subbasin. They have rate setting hearings regularly. They could change. We don't know if they'll go up or they'll go down. But as a starting point, we know that the Tulare Lake Basin is paying these fees. So you can see why we're working so hard to avoid this situation for our landowners and our growers because of the hard work we've been doing. I think we are seeing the sustainability in action, and our groundwater levels are coming up, and we're hoping to stabilize those. So we're trying to avoid this situation. Now, what happens if we stay out of probation? Next slide, please. You know, what we can predict is we get to keep our local control over our groundwater management. And you have a team that's established. We have elected board members on the 3 boards. When we got together last week, I was looking in the room, and I think we had 30 elected officials in the room together for our special conjoined board meeting. So these folks are making the hard decisions on your behalf. We're seeing the results of that, and we want to keep that going. The funding that we are currently collecting stays local. It doesn't go to fund a state agency. We can keep our money working for us, and our leadership can continue to make these decisions on our behalf, and they're the people in our communities. And then it allows us local agencies that are implementing the projects, the recharge basins, the improvements to our canal systems. It allows us to manage those projects and keep them going forward. So that's what happens if we can avoid probation and we can keep our momentum going forward. Next slide, please. So how are we trying to stay out of that probation? Well, obviously the first step was to try and address the inadequate deficiencies that the Department of Water Resources identified, which these are the 4 items generally that they identified as a lack of coordination between the sustainable management criteria. Sustainable management criteria are our goals that we set here locally, our benchmarks. So the levels, if you think about groundwater levels, what groundwater level are you allowing the system to drop to? We had discrepancies in our subsidence analysis. Subsidence is a very complicated issue, one that is a science that we're learning tremendous amounts daily on. And so we needed to fix those items. We had insufficient clarity in our mitigation framework and plan. We've worked on that so hard, we've removed any misunderstandings, and we've implemented our mitigation program and plan now as of last week. And then failure to consider how sustainable management criteria indicators affect one another. For instance, how does groundwater levels impact subsidence? Well, we've connected those 2 now so they talk to each other. So we did address these concerns. We've adopted draft GSPs. They're out on the street for a 30-day public comment period. If you'd like to see them, you can go to any one of our websites to download it and read it. We've delivered it to the State Water Resource Control Board. And what we'd like to do now is have Mike Hagman walk you through some of these changes in our GSPs. So Mike.
All right, thank you, Aaron and Mark. So when we got our second determination of inadequate plan, we had to change our approach to resolution. We got a real short amount of time again to solve the problem. Those are technical VWR. We didn't check a certain box, so we needed to establish a better approach. 1 for better technical guidance, and 2 for better public input. So we established a core technical team and a system of reporting to and bringing data, information and approvals to each of our boards and then back to the technical teams. So this effort, we began to develop a coordinated sustainability approach. We have to look at our what they call sustainable management criteria, sort of the, how low we'll let the water go, or where we want the water to be in, a certain period of time. Our operational space, we wanted to develop that and align all of our management criteria with regards to water levels and subsidence. What we also discovered in the inadequate determinations, we didn't have a way to. We knew we were going to impact people along the way, but we didn't have a clear method of mitigating for that impact. Allowing overdraft to occur will likely dry wells out. So we developed a mitigation program in the basin, and then each of our GSAs have developed a mitigation plan. And those mitigation plans address when we impact individuals or infrastructure, how we'll fund that and how we'll fix those issues. And then we address the deficiencies that DWR pointed out in the amended GSPs. And we have more room. We have more to go now. So we need to move on. We'll talk more about our next steps in just a bit, but we can go to the next slide. So this is the process I spoke to at the beginning of when I started speaking. We at the bottom there, we have we have these technical teams whose expertise is on areas of responsibility, their training. So each GSA has representatives on this technical team, and they develop sort of the notions and ideas, and give us the input to the technical, to the staff of each GSA, and that GSA works with their technical or advisory committees and boards, so we can iterate conclusion and develop a coordinated sustainable management criteria in the subbasin. This is what will keep us out of state probation. We have SMC's mitigation and coordinated efforts. And one of the things that we'll see in a little bit is we have had a lot of meetings for the public to have input on. And so this is really important that we identify that. So the information, when it gets done, it's not just in a, we don't just present to you in a sort of box and say, here it is, you get to open it on Christmas. We're trying all on to get folks involved. Next slide, please. So this is our local, sort of mantra here. We're trying to balance our water supply against impacts to beneficial users and uses of property interests. So a person that farms land is a beneficial user and has a property interest, and they need their water supply that they can get, and that needs to be protected. Wells for a domestic person are also beneficial uses and users. Infrastructure, Bryan Kern Canal, other canals are beneficial uses and users. So those are the kind of things we have to be aware of. We're managing the subbasin. The way we solve the problem is either not take water out of the ground or bring a lot more water in. And so we have our largest effort we placed on demand management, which is identifying the amount of water we can pull out of the subbasin and not create impacts that are not mitigatable. Projects will bring in surface supply or provide surface supply into basins or other methods so that we can replace or recharge our overdraft. And then, of course, mitigation, we hope, is a temporary effort that's there to replace or repair impacts to beneficial users and users of property in the subbasin. And these the GSPs that we revised have addressed all the state's concerns. I'm sorry, address all Department of Water Resources concerns, and we found a way to balance those impacts for groundwater users as well. Next slide. So our first effort was to get to a. I'm sorry, I'm getting on my screen here. I got a basically popping up in the middle of my screen. We have addressed all the Department of Water Resources deficiencies through the tools and data that we have. Those obviously will have to, as we grow and learn, we'll get better understanding of the subbasin. And we've taken that data and information and said, okay, what's going to happen if we do this? And we found a way to revise our SMCs to be more protective of beneficial uses and users. And in the process, getting input from folks who are saying, hey, look, what you're doing is harmful to me. One of the things we have to keep in mind is there's only so much water in the basin and only so much comes in. We have to coordinate that demand with the amount of flow that we get into the subbasin. So we're coordinating basin-wide our allocation methods. We're attempting to. Our allocation methods are approach to getting to stakeholders and helping them understand the conditions of the basin and the ways that they can help solve these issues. Next slide. So one of the things I just talked about was the mitigation program. So self-help enterprises we've partnered with as a subbasin. We're using self-help enterprises because they're already in place, which means they already wake up each morning ready to go out and meet the needs of a person's well who's gone dry, regardless of whether it's an impact of overdraft or whether it's an impact of well technicalities. So self-help is already in the space, already doing this work. They can respond in 24 hours with potable supply for drinking water, and then in 72 hours be ready to move with more aggressive amounts of supply so that folks can take care of at least some daily basic needs. And so our partnership with them is the first in the state, where we've said, okay, we've got a mitigation plan, we've got to implement it. We had to find a way to fund them. So each GSA has developed their methodology for funding the mitigation program. And self-help and self-help and the GSAs are working now to sign a contract. And we have one written, just going through a few minutes, but we're almost there. Okay, next slide. Okay, so in the 100, well, this would be 110 meetings now, because 108 was before yesterday's meeting and before today's meeting. So we have 110 meetings that took place where the public would have opportunities of providing their input. And in that, we talked with the public and how we will address the SMC's deficiencies determined by the Department of Water Resources and get to a mitigation program that will address temporary needs or repair impacted wells due to actions of overdraft. And next slide. So here we are, we've submitted for public comment our amended GSPs. This was a record, in my opinion. We totally rewrote these GSPs. The one thing we didn't do was change the basin setting document, which was a large document that we developed. We changed all of our GSPs to address the Department of Water Resources deficiencies. Well, the state board also provided deficiencies to us in water quality. We're going to have to look at that. And then in integrated surface water or groundwater dependent ecosystems, we've got to manage some issues on that. So on the integrated surface water, groundwater dependent ecosystems, there wasn't really a management tool out there for us in the past to really address that. So we didn't have enough understanding. Now they're saying, well, we sent out some things you can work with, so use these, and we'll get that in this. Now that we finished the draft, we're working on these other two deficiencies that the state has found. And then we moved to a probationary hearing coming up in January. So January 7th is sort of our D-Day. We've been working tirelessly to try and get a document. We failed. I mean, it's the bottom line. We didn't know enough. We know there's a lot of people who failed. We weren't the only ones. If they graded on the curve, we probably would have all gotten inadequate anyway. So this probationary hearing coming up will determine whether or not the state needs to lord over us and collect a bunch of money and use that money to take your money and use it to compel you into these actions that we're already required to do as a GSA. So we just need to get to a document that is approved. So we can go past this one. So what's coming up in the next little while, we have two workshops with the state board. And one of the benefits of these workshops is we've got a little more time than, say, the Tulare Lake and the Tule Subbasin folks have had. So we've gotten a little further down the road on resolution. But the state board staff had to look at these issues from the perspective of what they had in hand at the time. So their draft staff report said, we got to have these hearings coming up on the 24th, which is a Zoom meeting, kind of like what we're having now. And then one in person over in Visalia, where the state board and their staff will come and we'll have an opportunity to visit with them. What's really helpful to us is I'm not sure why they didn't do this in the past, but we'll get a chance, as GSAs to share with the board our progress and our direction with regard to our GSPs. State board knows that our GSPs are out. So they couldn't comment on that because they didn't have it when they sent the draft staff report out. So comments for the staff report from the state board is it is in July the 8th at noon. So if you've got comments there, submit those. And then again, our public hearings moved out to January. And it'll be in Sacramento Live, and then you'll be able to get to that online. I think that's done via YouTube or something, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, next. All right. Turn over to Mark.
Thank you, Michael. So, like to discuss now, all the GSAs have a lot of things going on, a lot of activities to reach sustainability, or, approved plan or not. There's a lot going on in all the 3 GSAs. The Greater Kaweah has 16 projects on slate to be taken care of, and also a lot of management actions, about 15 management actions that we're working with that will get us to 2040 at a place where we've reached sustainability. I'd like to briefly talk about a couple of projects. We have the Peregrine Basin expansion project. We have about 70 acres that have been reestablished there and provide stormwater protection, but more importantly, it captures that stormwater that might cause flooding in the city of Farmersville downstream of it, but it captures that flood water and then allows it to recharge into the basin and help with the overdraft situation. So that's a really good project. That project is now complete. We also have developed a land fallowing program for the greater Kaweah, where we had a reversed auction. Those that were interested in fallowing for a year could sign up for the program and put a price per acre. And we accepted the lowest bids and paid in the process of paying those farmers for fallowing their property for a year. Fallowing's not a pretty picture, but it's a necessary element. One of the tools in the toolbox for reaching sustainability is reducing the amount of acreage that utilizes groundwater. Two other management actions that are undergoing. Michael talked about the mitigation program. We have a dry well that we are in the process of mitigating for in the greater Kaweah through self-help. That should be completed, a long-term fix for that by the end of this summer. This family has been without well water for over a year now and have been operating off of a tank in front of their house, like those big green tanks you see out in the countryside. Those are areas where they've lost access to their well because it's gone dry due to overdraft, and that's refilled on a regular basis, and then they get drinking water bottles for their drinking water and cooking. We're also supplying now water for those tanker trucks to refill those tanks in the community around us. So it's nice to have those projects underway. A couple of projects that are in process: the Hannah Ranch Basin project over near Wood Lake. That's going to capture about 1,500 acre feet of water in storm times, both off the lower Kaweah River as well as the Bryant Kern Canal. It's a way to, through timing, manage that water better and hold it back during storm times and allow it to recharge later downstream or to provide it for irrigation purposes after the storm event. So we're real excited as that basin project is in process now, and we anticipate that being completed in 2026. So that's a great project. Another innovative project that's underway that we're anxious to actually get started on is the Delta View Canal project. This is an area west of 99 in the greater Kaweah that does not have any surface water canal system. So the idea is to build a canal in that area that can both bring in water for irrigation purposes, as well as there's a terminus basin that has more ability to recharge water if it had a supply system to it. So this would be an ability to increase the recharge of that basin. So we're pretty excited about that project. Another management action that we've implemented in 2023 is the start of our allocation system, where we're limiting the amount of groundwater that can be extracted and used for irrigation purposes in the greater Kaweah. That is moving us towards stepping towards sustainability in 2040. We've just started invoicing for that first year, the 2023 year. There's penalties for those that have overpumped. It's a necessary piece of that as Aaron pointed out, the demand is a necessary element of getting to reasonable use of groundwater. And so we're excited about those activities that are going on in the greater Kaweah. I will pass it over to Aaron.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, there's a lot going on across the sub-basin and in our individual areas. Next slide, it's the same slide we've got for all three of us. And so I wanted to just cover some of the projects and management actions that we've been implementing in the mid-Kaweah. A large portion of the projects really are associated with the irrigation district, which I manage also. The Tulare Irrigation District has been in the business of groundwater recharge for over 100 years. So we have a lot of practice in it, and we're getting better over time. So in the last approximately 10 to 15 years, we've added about 250 acres of recharge basins. We have a ribbon cutting ceremony next week for one of our projects that we're most excited about is one of our local recharge basins to help the community of Okieville put some water underneath the community there. So the Okieville recharge basin will have a ribbon cutting next Thursday for that project. We are putting water into that basin for the benefit of a disadvantaged community and the local farmers collectively. We also have some creative projects with our city partners. City of Tulare partnered with the irrigation district. This was even ahead of SGMA. In 2008, we purchased 135 acres for the Swall Recharge Basin, which is just upstream of the city's well fields that pump for the city of Tulare. We also have partnered with the city of Visalia on a very large project, which is a tertiary wastewater exchange program. That included the city of Visalia improving their wastewater treatment plant at the cost of $140 million to tertiary treated wastewater so that they can deliver that water to Tulare Irrigation District growers. And so we take that water year round, apply it to our crops. In exchange, we do groundwater recharge for the city of Visalia, and we've developed some projects in partnership with them, like the Packwood Creek Linear Recharge Project, where we've converted Packwood Creek into a long recharge basin through the city of Visalia. We're working on the Cameron Creek Linear Recharge Project right now. And we have a whole host of other pending projects that are funded and moving forward. And those are being developed as we speak, and a few other projects that we're seeking funding now. For instance, we have two large reservoirs, surface water reservoirs we're working on, the Seabourn Reservoir and the McKay Point Reservoir. That'll be a total combined surface water storage off the Kaweah River of 12,000 acre feet that we can push water in and out of to serve growers and recharge efforts. And then lastly, as we've all pointed out in the Kaweah Subbasin, we've understood in 2020 that our original plan projected that what we would do is lead with projects, and then whatever we couldn't meet with projects, we would take up through an allocation system or demand management, meaning if we didn't have enough supply, we couldn't plant all of our ground. What we realized in 2020 was we had to lead with the allocation system because if you didn't have any water, you didn't have a project. So we're leading with the allocation system and supporting that allocation system with our projects. So the more projects we have, the more allocation we can have to meet our demands. And right now, the Mid-Kaweah is allocating only the native yield, which everybody gets equally, and whatever water we put into ground to try and hold those groundwater levels as high as we can into the future. So that's just a broad picture of what the Mid-Kaweah is doing. I'm going to turn it over to Mike for his East Kaweah report.
All right. Look at that. Our picture looks just like everybody else's. So again, in the East Kaweah, our conditions a little bit different than the folks to the west. A little bit of Mark's the greater Kaweah goes all the way to the dam on Kaweah River. But a lot of ours is on what they call a thinner alluvial space. So we start out with ground that can store water maybe 20 feet from the surface to bedrock, and then out to just past 65, it sort of drops. Highway 65 sort of drops off like a half dome right there, and drops about 1,200 feet, 1,100 feet. So we have about 1,800 feet there. So on the east side, 25 feet out to 1,800 feet. So we're a little bit unique. So we've had to start quickly towards the allocation process. So in 2022, we started our allocation in October of 2022. At that point, it was native yield and a couple of tiers of overdraft. And then 23, we moved to one tier of overdraft and and then the native allocation. And then this 2024 year, we've only done native, and then you can purchase a supply that we're going to put in the ground for you. That water costs us some money, and the rest of the money we get from that goes towards our mitigation program. So the allocation system is the way we have to get to solving our east side overdraft. Now, not everything that lands here in the east stays here in the east. It moves west. So the west guys on our west are also having to adjust. And so they're looking at ways, as Aaron spoke, his allocation is now down to native yield plus whatever they put in the ground. And Greater Kaweah is working on theirs. Yeah, they might have to move faster towards reduced allocations, but they'll. We all know where our basin sits in terms of water. So one of the things that we have on the east side is we have really 3 or 4 sources of water. One of them is the Kaweah River that has surface supply. And that's delivered to what they call appropriators, people who have developed a right to that supply. Then there's some of that off of Lower Tule and a little bit off of Kings as well, off of Tule and off of Kings. And then the big one for the east side is the Central Valley Project, Bryan Kern Canal, Millerton Reservoir, Bryan Dam. That water supply, historically, the east side, when they would say, you know, we got all the water you want, take what you want, and we had demand systems. We didn't have. So when the water's coming, it already running. People don't need water to irrigate with. So we've started developing on the east side both private and public recharge facilities on a year like 23 and much of already this. We were in an uncontrolled season, they call it, up until the 17th of this month. So in the past year and 5 or 6 months, this Limor Irrigation District itself has put about 15 to 20,000 acre feet of water in the ground. On a dry year, we're going to have to rely more on groundwater. So our projects, there are several projects that are in. I won't list them all out, but a couple highlights that the Mariposa Basin or Lindsay Basin here in the city of Lindsay. It's their storm drain basin, and they also just next to that storm drain basin is about $1 million well that they can't use anymore due to water quality issues of the water by that well. So we've put a pipe in. We're delivering water to that space, and it can provide about 200-300 acre feet a year to that space. Hopefully, using the moniker of the solution to pollution is dilution. Hopefully, we're helping that system out, but we're also adding groundwater recharge in that program. That was funded largely by Department of Water Resources. And then the Lewis Creek recharge program is, Aaron talked about the linear recharge. This is kind of what's happening on Lewis Creek. We have about a 55 cubic foot per second siphon on Lewis Creek now. It's kind of like, the guys turn a still water or gas from your tank in your car, sticks a hose in there and sucks on it, and then out the gas comes. In this case, it's a 36-inch hose, and it after you pump it full of water and you open the valve up, and it sucks water and moves down the stream bed. So we've been operating that since the beginning of last month, and we put quite a bit of water in that already. So those are the current active projects. There's a few other. You'll call and Cottonwood are getting the turnout kind of like Lewis Creek is they're doing on Lewis Creek. There's a large basin called Rancho de Kaweah that's being worked through. So there's projects on the east side that will take advantage of very wet years where we can put water in places and prepare ourselves for dry use. And that's it.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and invite Aaron, Mark, and Mike to go ahead and turn all of your cameras on for our moderated panel. As Mark mentioned before when he introduced the event, that this moderated panel is hopefully going to answer some of the frequently asked questions, some questions that you all may be wondering about. It's questions that these general managers have received in the past. So hopefully it can answer some questions and maybe at the same time also spark some new questions. So once we're done with the kind of FAQ moderated panel portion, we'll go ahead and move into open question and answer, where you all, the participants, will be able to submit your questions, and we'll be here live to answer those. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started, hopefully just getting right to the heart of a core question on SGMA. And I'm going to pitch it to you, Mark, is why are we regulating groundwater? Isn't it our right?
Well, great question. I say for two reasons why we're regulating groundwater. One is, I worked for Kaweah Delta Water Conservation District for over 20 years, and the district's been monitoring and has groundwater depth information in the subbasin for like over 100 years. And I've watched this downward trend line as the groundwater table has dropped over time. It's very clear from that information that we're overdrafting the basin. There's too many uses and users in the basin for the same drops of water. So there's a lot of competition for that water. And what we saw is in a wet year like we had in 2023, the groundwater table will respond and pop back up again. And, obviously benefit from the all that water in a wet year. What happens though in the reverse is if you have a couple of drought years in a row, the groundwater table drops like a rock. And so therefore the trend line is this downward trend. So something had to be done. The second reason why we're regulating groundwater is the state has required us to do that. We did choose locally to get involved with this process because we wanted to manage it from a local perspective. But the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act requires that entities form and start managing groundwater to sustainability by 2040. If we didn't form locally, they would move in and do that themselves. So, and what about your rights for groundwater? Those rights are still there. You do have the right to for the property that you have to utilize the water underneath it. The challenge is, with all the uses and users in the subbasin, there's more water. There's less water available than we have users. And so by limiting that use, we're making it so it's available for everyone.
That's great. All right. So, we know that we have SGMA, this state law that's requiring the regulation. Fast forward to when, that law passed to now and where we're at in the Kaweah Subbasin. How did we get here? Why are we in this probationary process and other subbasins are not?
Yeah, and this came up at the meeting yesterday, and there was another follow-up question is, well, how many people have approved GSPs and how many people are don't have approved GSPs? And so let me start there really quick so people have maybe some diagnostics on those numbers. So as of now, there are 6 subbasins that are moving towards a probationary hearing process. One of them has been put in probation, which is the Tulare Lake subbasin. So a large majority of subbasins have already had their evaluations and have passes, And I think there's about another half a dozen to dozen that are back in that other step at the incomplete. They could potentially go into this probationary review process. So that's just some numbers there. The reason why I think we are in this position is when we submitted our 2022 or 2020 groundwater sustainability plan, to put it bluntly, that plan wasn't aggressive enough, and it had a future that had a significant amount of impacts to the shallowest of wells in our subbasin. And so we had to tighten our belts, have a tough discussion with our landowners and our beneficial users about revising those sustainable management criteria to reduce the impacts or mitigate those that may happen along the way. And so that next generation of groundwater sustainability plan is what we've got submitted to Department of State Water Resource Control Board. And then really at a bigger level, if you look at the Kaweah Subbasin and what SGMA was intended to regulate or control, groundwater levels, groundwater storage, water quality, subsidence, and interconnected surface waters, the only item that we don't have in the Kaweah Subbasin is seawater intrusion. And so we kind of are the poster child of this why Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was passed, is because it's to kind of limit or stop the impacts of those 5 items that we're working on right now.
All right, so with that in mind on, why we're here, why we're in this probationary process, what's the strategy of the Kaweah Subbasin to keep us out of probation?
Let me take that one. Okay. So, obviously, getting a groundwater sustainability plan that meets the law and the direction, the things that were found by Department of Water Resources and the state board in terms of deficiencies, get those corrected. We believe we've addressed very clearly the state Department of Water Resources determinations, the 2.5 that they had on there. Now we're working on the 2 that the state board has found, and so we're working closely with the state board. One of the positives, oftentimes you got to work with the state, and these are staff people and not policymakers or decision makers in terms of this is how we'll do it. So we have to work with them, and they have to kind of be careful, in terms of what they commit to, because they're not the ones making decisions. So, but we've been very fortunate to be able to work directly with state staff, got some great traction with them. They really want us, and for the most part, they said, hey, this extra 2 months will give us a chance to work through all your issues to get you to where we get to the probation hearing, and we just go, hey, all solved, let's send you all home. I think I'm not saying it's 100% certain, but we have it's more likely, certainly more likely than it was 13 months ago, but I think substantially more likely than it was 13 months ago. So I have great hope that we're between working with state staff and getting picking their brains, get an idea of what it is they're getting at. We can solve these 2 other issues and get a groundwater sustainability plan approved. Our goal still is to get that done late September, early October. Get documents that this GSP is done, which means we have to get this integrated surface water and the water quality issues solved before then. So it's we're just a lot of work's going to have to happen between now and the end of September.
Yeah, that's great, Mike. Thank you. That gives a great picture of, collectively what's going on in the Kaweah Subbasin as far as coordinating and coordinating a strategy to address deficiencies and make it through the probationary hearing. I think for folks who operate, maybe have businesses or operate in multiple GSAs, they're probably aware that there's some differences among the GSAs. There's a lot of coordination, but there are differences like allocation restrictions, for example. So why are there those differences if we're talking about this coordination?
Okay, so looks like I'm starting out. I'm sorry about that. I was reading one of the questions. So in the East Kaweah, as I noted earlier, we had to get the allocations quickly because frankly, most of our 200-foot level areas where the groundwater is about the basin are part of the geology of this basin is that about 200 feet was out of water. And so we were in a different situation. We had to go out and buy surface water, substantial expense to get water to folks on that side to get to meet their needs over there. So we had to get right to allocations, and we had to be more aggressive than folks out to our west because their groundwater space is deeper and they have more access to that supply. So that's that. In terms of coordination, we just couldn't wait. The East Kaweah had to get right to saying, okay, all we have is, I think in 22 is 1.65 acre feet plus precipitation. The next year was 1.15 acre feet plus precip. Last year was 0.9 acre feet plus precip. So we're down to native yield at this point, and therefore we've got we're kind of at that spot where we needed to be. We were hoping to be able to get to later, but now we're at that point. So we're different. We're different design, different structures. So I'll let Mark and Aaron address the differences there. Although Aaron's really Mid-Kaweah is a lot like acting a lot like East Kaweah, and then Greater Kaweah is working on solving theirs through programs. So I'll turn over to Mark and Aaron.
Yeah, so the Greater Kaweah is challenged with we kind of span the whole Kaweah Subbasin. We're about the farthest east you can get, the farthest west you can get in the subbasin, and also we span from the northern end to the southern end. So what that means is the description that Michael had of the east side, with the shallow aquifer and the fault there, we face those issues on the east side. And on the west side, we have, large sections of Corcoran clay complications. So there's water above and below the Corcoran clay that creates some challenges. Plus, I think one thing unique about the Greater Kaweah is over 50% of the growers and the land in the Greater Kaweah is groundwater dependent. They do not have or have very limited surface water supply. So that's challenging setting allocations for a varied group of conditions and grower situations. Aaron?
Yeah, for us, there's a uniqueness that we have. The Mid-Kaweah is partnered with the two cities, and so we have to work through those related issues. The two cities represent groundwater users, but when we do a water balance for them, you look at their pumping versus what they actually deliver to agriculture. Because in the case of Visalia and Tulare, both of the effluents from their wastewater treatment plants go to agriculture. When you look at those balances, they're if balanced in certain circumstances, we've done it. The one city actually comes out, they treat more at their wastewater treatment plant than they actually pump. And that's due to water coming into their industrial plants. So from an allocation perspective, we're not dealing with them, we're dealing with agriculture on our side, and there's inputs coming from the cities, but the cities have a cone of depression under them, that we have to solve that problem. And we can't do that through an allocation system. We have to do that through physical water. So I think each GSA has their own uniqueness, their own partnerships that we have to accommodate. So that's why, you know, you're seeing some differences. But we're unified in the approach. We have to get to groundwater sustainability. We're going to do that through our programs. We're all leading with our allocation systems and then supporting that allocation system with our projects. And that all of our numbers and minimum thresholds are coordinated across the subbasin. We've heard that message from our growers. Please be, you know, make it look as close to unified as possible. And I know Mark and Mike we've done a lot of hard work to try and get us there.
Yeah, I was going to add, Aaron and Michael, I think we have more in common than we have differences.
Most definitely.
That's great. Thank you to all three of you for going through just what makes your area unique and why folks may be seeing those uniquenesses coming out from the three GSAs. I'm going to pivot back onto the probation topic, and I just want to make sure that we clarify. I know, Aaron, you covered this on one of your slides in the presentation, but it doesn't hurt to go over it again. Why is it better that we keep local control over the SGMA process, you know, instead of just letting the state come in and do what they're going to do?
Let me grab that one first. So we've established these local governments with local people in the greater, the mid, and the east Kaweahs to come to manage the subbasin. We are the primary entities responsible for groundwater management in the subbasin. So if the state has to come in and sort of umbrella us, we're paying for that as well, and getting really, they're not there to get you more water. They would be focused primarily on demand management. So you wouldn't have a sort of a glide path, you know, like we're kind of looking at. We'd be right to, this is half a foot is all you get, and you all have to have meters on, and we would be kind of pushed into this direction. I'm not saying the state's doing that because they don't like us or they're looking to, you know, punish us somehow. We just got to get our local act together and be prepared not to have that additional sort of layer of something over top of us that we really don't need, that won't solve, you know, all of our concerns. It'll get right to solving the groundwater level issues, but it won't mitigate your issues as a landowner looking to, say, farm the way you used to.
You know, and then to add to Mike's kind of those, you know, those are excellent reasons why we don't want them there, but there's an intrinsic or inherent internal need to get to sustainability. In the discussions that I've had with the growers in the mid-Kaweah, there was a recognition in 2020, 2021 by a lot of my growers that came to me and said, hey, Aaron, we see what's happening here. Every year I'm going into my well and having to do well work, whether it be patch a column, do repairs. Most of them, majority of them, were lowering their pumps and then increasing horsepower and increasing power costs. And when they did the glide, their projection into the future, their assumption is that, well, it's not going to last them very long. You know, prior generations could rely on an ag deep well to last them, you know, 20, 30 years. And these are only lasting, you know, 10 if you're lucky. And the cost of those wells is going up exponentially. So if you, on one side, you know, you're looking at shallow wells costing about $250,000 in Tulare Irrigation District. To the other side, and if we chase them deeper, you're in the $250,000 to, some growers have indicated there, once they get all their wells working finally, they may have close to $1 million into their wells. So if we could stabilize the groundwater levels, that was, and still bring a small profit margin home. That was a business model that had a reliable future. And so inherently, not having the state come in, but we doing it ourselves was a good business plan.
Great. Okay. So I think this is a question that we covered in our moderated panel last night, and then I think it still came up in the audience Q&A. So I'd call it a most frequently asked question. Why aren't we spending more time pushing back against the state on this?
Okay, let me hit this one first. I'd like to kind of outline the basin for us real quickly. The Kaweah Subbasin, largely 75% of its water comes, its groundwater and its surface water comes from the Kaweah River and all the streams that feed the Kaweah River system. And so the other 25%, a little bit comes from Tule River, a little bit comes from Kings, a large amount comes from the CDP. So let's hold that one back for a second. But so our groundwater is largely dependent on. There's no state control of our supplies. It's us now realizing, we're taking 200,000 plus acre feet out of the ground in excess of what God puts in there. And so the one impact that we are having, and we're working, the CDP contractors have been fighting this fight since 1985, basically, to protect our water supply, are the conditions that occur in the Delta, where the CDP water supply in this side of the subbasin comes from an exchange. So the exchange, the federal government delivers water to people who used to take water from the San Joaquin River and gives them Sacramento River water. In exchange, they allow us to take the San Joaquin River water. So that exchange has been going on for years, 1948. But recently actions were taken to remove that supply to the east side because there were some restrictions or limited amount of supply to the exchange people. And so the local federal folks said, hey, well, we'll deliver the Kaweah supply down to them. And so we didn't get water supply. So we're fighting that. Other things have come up to sort of challenge that supply as well. We've been on this issue for a substantial amount of time. So that we look at ourselves and go, okay, well, I got this jug of water, and it's a gallon, and my inflow is a half a gallon, and I'm drinking 3/4 of a gallon of it. You're always going to be an overdraft. This isn't the state taking something away again. This is good basin management. We have got to not overdraft a substantial amount of water from our basin. And that's kind of where we've been focused on how to get to their allocations is the easiest way, the most productive way of getting there. That way, a farmer in land X has just as much opportunity as farmer in land Y in terms of a native supply. Guys, anything else?
I think I'll summarize what I think I heard you say, Michael, is we can't really control the state, but we can manage our local water resources and make an impact here. And we need to because of the overdraft conditions. So that's kind of where we are today.
Good point, Mark.
Great. So it's been mentioned, right? We can't control the state. We're doing what we can locally. And the Kaweah Subbasin, as folks know, has, implemented demand management through their allocation systems. And this is another most frequently asked question, I would say, is why don't we just build more surface water storage to solve this problem?
Yeah, it's one we deal with regularly, and one, if you look at the history of our region, if you look into the 30s and 40s, when we were having declining groundwater levels and subsidence, the state and the federal government built the Central Valley Project, which is a network of reservoirs and canals, and the State Water Project, which is a network of canals and reservoirs to distribute water from Northern California or other locations throughout the Central Valley and to Southern California. And that was to address that issue. So the question is, why aren't we building more surface water storage projects? And I wish I had a very simple, elegant answer to that, other than it's difficult and timely to do that, and there's a lot of opposition. So you add those elements up, and surface water storage into the future is a very difficult conversation. I do have a front row seat to that discussion, because when the Temperance Flat Reservoir Authority was moving the project forward, I was asked to serve as the executive director of that project. And so I saw how that process went, and what I could tell was, again, the dynamics of that project was, we received $171 million as seed money, is all I could call it, for a $3.8 billion project. So that money would have only taken us through permitting and some design. The bulk of the construction of that project would have fallen on the growers or the landowners in the Central Valley. And so they would have been saddled with a cost, and that, cost per acre foot was upwards of $3,800 to $3,500 per acre foot of storage costs. You would be saddled with that, and the project wouldn't come online till maybe 2035. And again, our objective here, or our test, is to achieve sustainability by 2040. So it wouldn't have been online in time for us to solve our sustainability problems. That being said, do our GSAs and our boards believe in surface water storage? 150%. And I say that because our local agencies are investing in surface water storage, but they're not the large regional, big statewide projects that you're seeing or hearing about. Mark has the Hannah project, which is a surface water storage project off the Bryant Kern Canal. Tulare Irrigation District has its 12,000 acre feet of surface water storage at Seaborn and McKay Point Reservoir. And we're looking into other alternatives locally. Again, we believe in local management, local control, and that's what we're trying to maintain, why it's so important. That way we can locally build these small projects, or smaller than statewide, and use it for the benefit of our growers in our region, and keep our dollars closer to home. So statewide reservoirs are difficult, timely, and have some opposition. Locally, we know we believe in it, and so we're moving those projects forward on your behalf. So we're working on it, and hopefully you see some storage here. Mark's is actually very close to being done, and are at the Kaweah Delta, theirs is close to being done, and ours is spooling up right now. We hope to have our first reservoir in the next 2 years or so.
Yeah, that's great, Aaron. Thanks for the update on the projects that you may not see in the news or in the papers, but they're happening right in everyone's backyards. And I know every GSA is pursuing those projects. You're pursuing funding for those projects. So thanks for that update. I'm going to end with one last question. If I'm a stakeholder here today attending this meeting, what should I be doing to participate positively in this probationary process?
Yeah, I'll tackle that one, because it's one that there was one that came up in the chat. We're trying to keep up with the chat and answer at the same time, because we really do need your folks' help. Mark, Mike, and I, every day we wake up in the morning, there hasn't been an 8-hour day in the last at least 18 years I've been working, because we're out trying to meet these goals and objectives on your behalf. We're at a critical junction point right now. You're doing the hard work on the field, and right now you're doing the right thing by participating with us in these workshops to get educated on the things that we're doing. And so what you can do to help is help carry that message to the State Water Resources Control Board. There are workshops next week, and if you feel inclined to show up and share the message that we growers are doing on the ground here, that would be very helpful. We have a tremendous amount of momentum going in the Kaweah Subbasin. We have allocations in place, we have mitigation in place, we have projects moving forward. We're increasing our surface water storage, we're increasing surface water supplies. I just got a report back from my own staff about in the years that we're running now, we're importing more surface water than we ever have before. Those things are all working in our favor. And if we break the momentum by going into probation, I mean, we will lose a tremendous amount of sustainability into the future. It actually puts us in jeopardy in the Kaweah Subbasin. So participating here is a good first step. Helping us carry that message is really important in the future. If you're interested or need help, please reach out to any one of us and we can help you get organized and to the events, or help you even participate in that public portion of that. So yeah, I want to say thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your day to be with us.
Great. Any other thoughts from the managers before we move into the audience Q&A?
I'll just add that we all have various advisory committees or stakeholder committees. And, you know, we're always looking for people to join us in that process. We have a certain amount of chairs and openings come up though. And so, you know, if you're following the process, you're interested in being a part of the process, you can attend any of our public meetings, almost all our meetings on the board meetings, the stakeholder meetings, the technical advisory meetings are all open to the public, where you can come and join in and give comments, ask questions, as well as opportunities to join some of those committees at certain times. So there's ways that you can get involved, and as Aaron said, we welcome you to attend the state board workshops next week. And if you have comments about how things are going in the subbasin, I think that they would be welcome.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. So I know that folks have already been asking their questions, and folks, the managers have been typing in their answers to those. I actually see one that looks like a duplicate question, so I'm going to go ahead and just ask it out loud, even though there's been some typed responses to it. But it's about, you know, restricting water use for new developments, maybe new farming operations, new housing developments, that kind of thing. Is there anything that the GSAs are doing about that expanded development, or are there any restrictions planned?
I'll tackle it from what I see, because I have, so let me tackle it from the city perspective first, right? Because I have the two largest cities in the GSA that I'm coordinating with. So when we do the water balance on the communities, the actual water usage is lower than the agricultural usage. And when we do the actual, through the exchange agreements, the usage of these communities' water ends up in agricultural's usage. So the tertiary water from the city of Visalia goes to growers within Tulare Irrigation District. The secondary water coming out of the Tulare plant goes to landowners around the wastewater treatment plant. So we're balanced as far as the usage is concerned. The concern that the cities, and we are addressing them and they're significant, is the cone of depression under the two cities. That's a permanent hole if you want to look at it from just a simplified. And what they're doing to solve that problem is they're actively building projects right now to put water as fast as they can back under the city to solve that problem. And they're investing millions and millions of dollars. Both cities started that process before Sigma, actually. So we've got the projects up and running. Visalia has ringed their community with recharge projects in Tulare. Also, we've started that. We have that large complex of 135 acres, and then we're working on some other programs. That's how we're addressing it there. They are also under state mandates to reduce water usage. So that is happening concurrently. Both indoor use and outdoor use is being restricted. So we are actually seeing the pumping and groundwater usage go down for the two cities. From an agricultural perspective, we are, if you took a look at the Tulare Irrigation District or generally the Mid-Kaweah GSA, almost every acre of our footprint was being farmed. So we don't have a lot of new farming going into production. I will say that looking at the demand and how much water we used and how much we could supply. So on average, we were needing about 3 to 3.5 acre feet per acre, and we can only supply about 2.5. So you are seeing a reduction in the agricultural footprint, and that started in 2022. I don't know if Mike or Mark, you want to add anything to that?
I'll just add briefly that the other thing that we do is all three GSAs receive information from the counties, Tulare County and Kings County, when a permit is applied for. So if someone applies for a new well, it comes across our desk and we evaluate whether that well makes sense or not. It's a beginning of a process to, look at and evaluate what makes sense for wells in the area. It's an evolving process, but we think eventually between us and the counties, we have a better system for really doing a check and balance on well permits so that it doesn't get out of hand.
All right, so Mark, this one is for you, since Greater Kaweah is mentioned specifically. The question is, what incentives are available for non-irrigated parcel with surface water riparian rights to partner with the Greater Kaweah for a recharge opportunity?
Well, I encourage you to come and talk to us about that. We'd love to talk specifically about how that can be managed. Having a surface water right like a riparian right is extremely valuable for you, and there are options. So I'd like to understand a little better what it specifically it is that you had in mind. But we are trying to encourage recharge. The challenge is recharging riparian water by state law is not allowed. It's only a 30-day supply of water that's available there and cannot be recharged. So there may be other ways to best utilize that riparian right, but you can't use it for recharge purposes.
Great, thanks, Mark. Let's see, another question, and I think this is a good one to ask out loud as well and hear from the different managers, because it's something that came up yesterday during our in-person event, is about groundwater credit transfers. So the question asked here is the allowance of groundwater credit transfers from APN to APN subject to termination in the future?
So this is, I've had this question a couple times, and it starts out as we're allocating groundwater right now. And so if grower Joe gets an allocation of 1 acre foot, what's the risk in the future, right? So I've identified there's a couple risks, right? And that's why our boards have been so careful about how we do this, and why everybody wishes they had the most flexibility in all these programs. Let us do whatever we need, open market. The problem is, one of the biggest risks is we allocate a groundwater supply that isn't there. And if we allocate something that you're at a minimum threshold, which is one of the benchmarks that basically if the groundwater drops to that minimum threshold, we are sent over the state board kind of to be taken over. So that is one risk, is that we allocate something that's actually physically not there. The second risk is that what happens if the state board does come in and put you under probation, and how does that affect the allocations that have been made historically and could be made into the future? The three GSAs worked collaboratively in 2019 to set up a system called the water accounting framework. And that water accounting framework spells out somewhat ownership of water in the subbasin. Because the way I approach groundwater in the Kaweah Subbasin is it's not groundwater. It's surface water that's percolating its way down to the groundwater system. So we have a methodology to track what's going into the groundwater system. And based on the simple nature of investment in that water supply, you get credit for that. Now that investment is based in case law and groundwater law. So one of the tenets of SGMA is that SGMA cannot override current groundwater and surface water law. So the idea is we've kind of encapsulated it for you. I'm not going to say I can guarantee that that is going to hold up, but we have tried our best to encapsulate it such that you could keep it as long as you can. So that's my answer. In all things in groundwater, it's always a but, if, maybe, because guarantees are very difficult. Once it goes into the ground, it enters a whole new dimension.
All right, so there's nothing open right now. Something though that was answered by you, Aaron, in a typed out response, I think is a good question to just answer out loud and maybe hear from the managers on their thoughts. It's, will projects be put on hold if the subbasin is put in probation? So what GSA activities stop and what continues?
You know, I think a lot of the projects, and you heard that from Aaron, myself, and Michael, a lot of the projects are being taken on by water districts. The funding's always a tricky part, but for instance, you know, I mentioned Peregrine Project and Hannah Ranch Project. Both of those were being developed and constructed by Kaweah Delta Water Conservation District. So I think, long way of saying, those agencies will still be working on water projects. I think it may create some challenges for funding and partnerships. But I can see the projects continuing on. I do know that state, I do feel that the state won't be focused on projects. And so that partnership will become weaker. But I'd like to think that the Linmore irrigation districts, the Tulare irrigation districts, the Kaweah Delta Water Conservation Districts will be doing their part. They just won't have the partnership, or might be challenged by the partnership of the GSA working with them.
I think a bigger risk is, again, building on what the Kaweah Subbasin has propped up. If we end up in probation, there's significant fees that the landowners, essentially everything that Mark, Mike, and I are collecting today to implement locally for the benefit of the growers, will probably, as far as the mitigation and allocation systems and buying more surface water with the dollars, probably disappears. In conversations with the growers that I've been working with, their comment is nothing against the GSA and nothing against me personally, but when they have to pay that bill to the state and Aaron submits a bill, it's kind of, I hate to use the terminology, but they said, I can't serve two masters. I can't comply with two programs doing the same thing. I can only manage one of those. In agriculture today, many of you that may be on this call right now know the commodity markets and the pricing of your product is at its all-time low, and the cost inputs at the all-time high. So the profit margin is razor thin. And so if you have to comply with the state, you're going to make that payment, because again, their penalties are set high at 25% if you don't pay. So I think first and foremost, what we lose ground on is our mitigation programs are propped up by collecting funds from our growers to mitigate the shallow domestic wells. That program disappears because I won't have the funding, right? Once that funding, and everything starts collapsing at that point, because the money and the things that we're doing to gain that momentum just kind of start pulling back from there. So I do agree with Mark. I mean, we'll still move the projects forward. You know, it'll be a harder sell, harder road ahead, but you know, we'll just keep inching along on them. It just right now, again, if I can only impress one thing you take away from this workshop, from me particularly, is you folks have created the momentum to get us to sustainability. The landowners have done it, and we've got it. We've got to keep it. And if the state board can come behind us and actually prop us up, that's even a better way to look at this situation. We need to ask them to help us keep our momentum going. Don't kill our momentum.
Great, thanks, Mark and Aaron. We do have another question here that all three GSAs probably could answer in their own way with their, own allocation systems being in place. So, what are the projected allocations for water year 2025?
I guess I'll start off. Really good question. I don't even know myself. I know that we're working on it. I know that we're real excited about all the work we've been doing sub-basin wide to develop the sustainable management criteria that we have that's in the new draft plan that's been released for public review. That's data, that information is going to help feed where we go with allocations. I don't know where that is today. We're in the process of doing that as we speak. I will say that I know in the greater Kaweah for sure, our allocations will probably be less than they were for 2024. Unfortunate, but it's where we need to be as we ramp down towards 2040 and sustainable yield. We're going to have to tighten the belt, and I just don't know how much yet. So that's about all I could tell you right now. Stay tuned to the meetings. We'll be discussing that as we develop in these next 2 months.
Yeah, so East Kaweah is attempting to have an allocation at the July 22nd board meeting. And ours, we're basing our, typically, the technical advisory committee makes a recommendation, but they've established a pattern where they say how much water has precipitation we had or inflow from the Kaweah Subbasin that we had for the past 25 years. They get the average number and they use that as a basis. So it'll likely be in the 0.85 acre feet per acre range again in the East Kaweah, and the precipitation is also based on a 25-year rolling average of historical precipitation, which might be around 11. It's about 11.1 inches, I think, in the East Kaweah. And then when the TAC is going to recommend something less than last year, we allocated as an offset to the spectral analysis done in the ET process. It looks at what's going on in the earth and says, okay, that's how much water is coming off. Some of that's coming from precipitation and effective precipitation of the plants. So that about 25% of the water that's precipitated goes into the basin. So as a groundwater recharge. So they'll probably recommend a 70 or 75% of 25-year historical average precipitation. Last year, the board said, no, we're going to do 92%, even though the TAC recommended 75%. So it'll likely be somewhere between 75 and 92%, is my guess. So 85% or 0.85 acre feet per acre on data supply, and then some factor on 11.1 inches. I would just assume, maybe 75.7 acre feet to 0.85 acre feet per acre on precipitation credit offset.
The Kaweah started its analysis a couple weeks ago. We sat down with our advisory committee this Tuesday and provided them with some numbers. And the way we go about calculating our allocation is we look at how much groundwater Tulare Irrigation District put in the ground in prior years and divide that into chunks for current and future year allocations. Without going into a whole bunch of detail, it's looking like we will stay at the current allocation that we had for water year 2024, which is 1.83 acre feet per acre, inclusive of the native yield. So that's about 1 acre foot per acre of allocation from the mid-Kaweah GSA. And like Mark said, we have done I don't know how to, I can't go into a lot of detail, but the leap of information and data and understanding from prior generation GSP to this one, I cannot emphasize enough how much we've learned in 13 months with the folks that we've brought on board with us to help us understand this. And so we have a much better understanding. And so these numbers are going to begin to get tighter, more consistent, and more, reliable as we move forward. So that's why we're moving our allocations up to July now instead of October. So that's all I can add for right now. We hope to have our allocations set by the second or third week in July.
Great. Okay, Mike, there was one East Kaweah related question that was submitted into the chat. So I want to make sure that we don't overlook it. The question is, why did the East Kaweah take away precipitation credits and switch to a much lower flat rate?
Okay, so we didn't take away precipitation credits and switch to a lower flat rate. So what we did was we flattened out the curve. So an example, in 2021, we had 4 inches of rain. So your allocation would have been 90% of 4 inches, 3.6 inches. In 2023, we had 20 inches of rain. So you would have gotten 90% of 20 inches. So 18 inches of rain. So in order to move away from this bounce around and give everybody a sort of a way to measure their impacts a little, to calculate their opportunities a little better, we equalized the analysis. So on a year like 2021, you would have received 75% of 11 inches. In a year like 2023, you would have received 7% of 75% of 20 inches. I mean, you would still receive 75% of 11 inches. So each year there are very wet years. An example of 23, about 60% of that water reached the groundwater aquifer. It wasn't ET'd off the ground, but we gave you it like it was, and so that's a negative impact to our groundwater supply. It overdrafts our groundwater supply. So what we're doing is equaling out or averaging out your amount so you can plan better as a landowner.
You got to thank you, Mike. So
Of course.
I think that was helpful. Okay, great. I'm not seeing any more questions at this time. We'll maybe since we're not quite to our 11, maybe someone's feverishly typing right now and trying to get their question in. Right. Not seeing anything. So is there anything else just from the GSA managers, Aaron, Mark, and Mike, that you want to express to the group today before we end the meeting?
Oh, let me address real quickly. And Aaron's put it in his chat, but we do appreciate all of my board members farm or have farmed. So they're either done farming or most of them are still farming. A lot of them live in communities. A lot of them live on wells, and so they're multifaceted in terms of what their condition is. But they also understand our unique condition in the Kaweah Subbasin. We have to manage what God puts in the ground for us and what surface supply he can get to us, or we can get. So we've got to keep that in mind, but we really appreciate this hard news oftentimes, and can a person capitalize on this? Does a person have the capital needed to meet the objectives of reduced supply? I mean, those questions you have to internally ask yourself, but we appreciate your patience and working with us on this.
I guess I want to add, and I saw it yesterday, it's nice to work. And it's I've always told people it's really impressive when I get around the folks in the Kaweah Subbasin, and it happened yesterday and it happens today, where we live in this basin, we understand it, we understand the issues. I don't think anybody is trying to deny the issues. And I think as long as we stick together and we keep doing what Kaweah Subbasin growers are good at, is identifying these issues, working through them, and getting into a better future, I think we have a good shot at not only avoiding probation, which is right now our main goal, but really achieving groundwater sustainability, keeping our agricultural communities with profit margins. I know it looks, difficult, but let's stick together and try and make this work, and keep our communities, where they're at, the vibrant ag communities that we rely on. And we know that the local restaurant is not relying on the tech industry out of San Jose to support its diners. It's the farmers, the businesses that serve agriculture. So stick with us. We hope we're doing a good job. I know I wake up in the morning questioning everything I do, which is a healthy thing for me. And we hope that you'll stick with us, even next week. Where we're going to make the best gains is when we show that we're organized, we're informed, we're willing to put in the hard, roll up our sleeves and do the hard work. And the message we need to convey to the state board is we've got the momentum, and you need to let us keep that momentum going. And so with that, I want you guys to have a great weekend. Know that the three of us are probably working over the weekend anyway to get this done. And next week we've got a lot going on. And last thing, we are seeing the results, right? So that's always, well, how do we know this is working? Again, I won't say that everything we did is causing them to push the probation hearing off, but I know it is influencing their decision-making process. And for them to move off of November 5th and go to January 7th, talking to our teams is gargantuan. It was a major, major lift for them to make that decision. And so I think it plays into the fact that we got them a revised GSP, we've implemented our mitigation plan, and we've got a lot going on in our subbasin. So they're hearing us. So, and again, call us if you've got any questions or issues. That's why we're here.
You may be tired of hearing agriculture this and grower that. And the reality is, in our subbasin, 94% of the water use, surface water and groundwater, is to agriculture. So that's why we keep talking about agriculture as the main solution for this. And so we also want you to be a part of the main solution for this by joining us in this effort and giving us your feedback and your comments, calling us, talking to you. We have each GSA has tried to put in together a toolbox of tools to help you succeed with less groundwater. So contact us, see about the programs we have, talk about what your challenges are, and we can work with you on it. And don't forget about the dashboard. It's your way of keeping track of where you are and monitoring and managing your water sources. So we're here to help you in that process. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great, and we hope you have a great weekend.
All right, with that, we'll close things out. Thank you to everyone for attending. Thanks, Aaron, Mark, and Mike.
You're welcome.